Hi everyone, I've come here to do something that I hate, which is a quick sales pitch. On the 16th of January, Adam Lawrence and I are hosting our 5th property business workshop. If you've come to ones before, you'll know they are packed full of information for existing property business owners and portfolio holders. Normally, it's not the sexy stuff. It's the things that property business owners leave off or try and put to another day. But we get down to the nitty-gritty to help your property business scale. What we're going to be doing in January is focusing on productivity, looking at financial accounting and bookkeeping procedures to make sure that you understand all that data that's coming out of your business and how to act on it in terms of risks and opportunities and what are the metrics to track. As I said, it's the 16th of January. You can check out more information here. Please do come along. Tickets are selling out fast. And if you've been to one of them before, you will know that they're fantastic events, not just for the information, but also for the networking as well. They do sell out quickly. They're always sold out. So please, please, please click on that link and have a look and hopefully see you there.
Welcome to the Rodcast with Rod Turner, the show all about real estate. We discuss everything that affects asset-backed businesses, investments, and go deep into the details with some of the best in the business.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Rodcast. Today we've got the fantastic John Rose from Suitable Life back in the studio. The last episode was episode 62, where he gave us a masterclass in planning, financial advice really, and planning for your estate and looking at various different taps that you would call them in terms of, well, all sorts of financial planning really. So please go back and have a listen of that episode. So many kind of nuggets of information. Absolutely fantastic. But welcome, John. How are you?
Thanks, Rod. Yeah, thanks for inviting me back. All good. Thank you very much. All good.
Good. So look, today we thought we'd run through a few different things. Lots has been changing in the markets. We've had new budgets. But I guess I wanted to start on legacy planning. So lots of people and lots of listeners here will probably have gone into property with the idea of building up a financial pot and sometimes even for not just their pension, but also to hand down to family members or look after family members and things like that. How would you, and also, sorry, before we go on to that, one of the things that came up this week was Warren Buffett released this fantastic memo or note about how he was approaching his legacy planning, which was super, super interesting. And I put a link on that on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to have a look, I'll link that to the show notes. But how would you advise people that come to you in the first instance? How would you say to approach legacy planning?
I think, the Berkshire Hathaway letter that Warren Buffett put out there was excellent. And I think, the best quote in there obviously is leave them enough to do anything, but a lot, not too much that they do nothing. And I think there's a lot to be said around that. And I suppose legacy planning you would break down in a number of different ways, Rod, because legacy planning is a really catch-all thing that means different things to different people. With legacy planning, there is the financial element of legacy planning, there is the non-financial element of legacy planning. And I suppose when you talk about legacy planning, everyone thinks of the financial element. How can I gift or divest my estate to my family over time or at the end when I die in the most tax efficient way? And that is what most people's thought of legacy planning is. To be honest, it's a much bigger topic and subject than that. Lots of people don't really give any thought until much later in life, and probably when you're in your 70s, maybe probably even touching 80s, start to think about, well, how am I remembered and things like that. And I find with clients that I deal with, when we are in our 40s, 50s, and still probably in our 60s, that doesn't really bother us so much. And then as we get older into our sort of latter 70s and 80s, and I also see a big change when people have grandkids, right, grandchildren. Once that next generation comes in, lots of things change financially, emotionally, and the way people start to think about that whole legacy planning. So,
You've just reminded me of something really silly. The other day I was watching a film on Disney with my kids called Coco. As it's about this young boy that goes into the underworld or the afterlife, and it's all about how people are remembered. And that for me is a really good reminder of legacy planning. It's not just like you say the financial, but it's how you're remembered. How would you like to be remembered? Was it that you're remembered by giving someone a big gift or doing good things, or is there something, I don't know, for me it's, well, that building, we created that, and things like that is a good thing. But yeah, sorry, thought I'd jump in there with that.
Well, no, I mean, we'll come back to it in a minute, I think, because it's definitely worth a discussion, because, we think about financial dividends in that financial sense, but no one ever thinks about the memory dividends, right? Then, memory dividends are a thing, there's something that we want to think about, that we are leaving for people. But again, I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later in the podcast. But so for me, legacy means different things to different people. What I see a lot of in the whole property space, and being a property investor myself, everyone sits there and thinks that they're building a legacy for their children. This property portfolio, I'm going to pass it on. There's been blood, sweat and tears in it to turn around and get it to the point that it is, that they're happy, that it's earning enough income for them. And it's all about, I'm going to pass this on. What I find often is people haven't then spoken to their children of whether that's what they want. So I would say the first place to start in some legacy planning is talk to your kids and talk to your family and the people that mean something to you, that in your mind this legacy is for, because there seems to be 0 point for me in you continuing to hold on to, manage, manage the people who are managing it for you, this big behemoth of a property portfolio, if the first thing the kids are going to do is sell it when you're gone. But your whole thing was no, you must keep it. So you might have gone through a whole process to try and keep everything intact, and it's gone within a matter of years when you're gone. So I would first and foremost sit down with people, have a chat with family, because it's a taboo subject, right? No one likes talking about when they're gone. Often the children don't like to think about when you pass. So I was only speaking to a client literally 2 days ago. They've got 2 sons. One son, very open to conversations about it. One, it is the taboo subject. I don't want to think about when you go on, mum, not entertaining or mum and dad, not entertaining the conversation at all whatsoever. And that can bring a degree of difficulty in, if I'm being honest.
It's funny, isn't it? Because property, when you speak to people, any investors really, most investments are for, when you really get down to the root cause of why you're investing, it's to give you options, and really it's to give some income to allow you to pay your outgoings and do what you want with who you want when you want, kind of thing. So everyone gets very, very kind of emotive over property, and it's their baby, and they, like you say, they've built it through blood, sweat and tears. But actually, when you boil it down, it's not always about the property, it's about what it generates, and it's about that income and what that then provides you for your life. Because I don't think anyone goes into it wanting to run around dealing with tenants and changing toilet seats and plumbing issues and things like that. But they might go into it going, well, actually, yeah, there's a bit of that, but what it gives me is flexibility, like running any business really. It's well, I've got a bit more flexibility over my time, and I've got a few more options. And so actually, it's not so much about the property. And if kids do decide to sell it, fine, just don't go spend all the capital. I might want you to go, well, at least invest in something else so that can give that. Because I don't know, if anyone's listening is like me, they want to always, a lot of entrepreneurs or people that go into business normally are a bit of a controlling mentality, and you think, well, I want this to happen when I'm gone, but you're gone, so you're not there to control it.
There's a control freak in most of us. I totally, I know exactly where you're coming from. I am a control freak in many aspects, and I think one of the positives about property and why people love property is it's a tangible asset. You can see it, there it is. There's some bricks and mortar standing there. I don't know too many, and therefore it gets very emotive. Yeah. I don't know too many people who get really emotive about a Vanguard Life Strategy Fund or something like that, whereas bricks and mortar, they do. And not only is it then that tangibility of bricks and mortar, you've built that portfolio. I'm a property investor. I've got 18 HMOs. Me and my business partner, Lindsay, proper blood, sweat and tears went into building that property portfolio over a period of time. So not only have you got the tangibility, you're emotionally invested in it. Often the next generation aren't. Yeah. And actually it works the other way, because the next generation have seen the blood, sweat and the tears that have gone into it. They have seen the phone call on a Friday night from the tenant who's called the emergency phone, because for him an emergency is someone's nicked his cheese on a Friday night when he's come back from the pub and he can't turn around and make his cheese on toast. So they see that as a hassle. And therefore they don't have the emotional factor of I built it, and then they see the hassle factor with it. So like I say, first off, speak to your children, because I think you will be surprised at what they want. Now, you may well still, in this control freakness that we have, say, well, I'm sorry, that's what you're going to get. Yeah, and there's conversations and things spoken on me. Well, I've been talking to Sheena and the kids, So that I would say is the first port of call for everybody. Now, it might not be that then you go sell up the next day, right? Because any legacy is there for your lifetime as well. But it's going to start. These conversations often have to happen, little and often, because most people aren't prepared for those sort of much bigger, deeper conversations in one hit. So, but start that conversation sooner rather than later.
When we've spoken in the past, you've come up with some kind of great stats about not just property investments, but family businesses and the next generation taking on. And I can't remember what the figure was, but it was an absolutely crazy percentage of the next generation who did not want that family business. And it was, like I said, not just property investments, it was all family businesses.
Well, my biggest sort of personal stat that I see firsthand is, I'm a franchisee of Platinum Property Partners and a co-owner of that business now. And within that network, 400 people are in it or have been through it and built HMO property portfolios. And of those 400, of which I would say at least 350, the aim has been, or one of the big drivers of joining it has been, I'm growing a legacy for my children. Probably a dozen tops have got any child involvement at the moment or are being passed on to children. The majority in that network, the kids are not interested, right? And are absolutely showing no signs of interest, or have flatly turned around and said, I'm not interested. So when you look at that, it's such a small percentage, and that is, and business succession, as we know, in that wider context, is so difficult because, there's the famous stat, the first generation builds the money, the second, it's lost by the third generation. Yeah. So it's a really difficult piece, I think, that whole business succession, and I think it's magnified in the property investment space because of. We're all emotionally invested in our businesses that we build. I know you have other business interests outside of property. I obviously do with Suitable Life. And I've put a lot of blood, sweat and tears in that. And I think about that as a business and, where that would go and things like that. So they're really difficult. They're tough conversations to have. And
I guess people listening might think, well, yeah, they might not be interested in the business or the properties, but I bet they're interested in the income it generates. What would you kind of say to that? How can people kind of start to think about what that income generation looks like and how to maybe protect it without letting all the capital go to on the pan?
And I think you're right. I think there's two things going on there, because when your children are younger, remember they're not at your stage of life when you probably started to build that portfolio yet. They haven't gone through that period of working for quite a number of years and thinking, don't know whether I want to do that for the rest of my life. And so they're at the start of a journey, whereas probably when you started to build the property portfolio, certainly, with me, I was about 40 when I started building it. So I'd gone through a number of years of work and own business and everything else before it was like, that is a lot of hard work. I need to try and find another way of getting another form of income that isn't just relying on my work and effort and things like that. So So part of the reason they probably are also not as attached to the property is they haven't been through that journey and come out the other side where they're starting to think that other form of income will be great. That partly then education can help with that. Right? That this is what's going to happen. This is what property can bring. So we may find that there is a switch, within the family dynamic and what children think. But if there isn't, I look at my own personal experience. I'm an older dad, right? I was a first-time dad at 46. I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old. I want to pass some capital asset onto them. I'm very much about trying to gift during lifetime.
Yeah.
But I obviously won't, exhaust all assets. My
You've
dad.
still got to be able to have income for yourself, and we talked about in episode 62. Some stages of retirement can be quite expensive.
Absolutely right. So you can't divest yourself with everything. There is no golden bullet and or silver bullet in legacy planning. Other than give it all away and then you've got nothing to live on. And survive 7 years. That's the only way you can get rid of everything. So we're not going to do that. So I look at my personal situation and think, I don't want to pass on the time commitment to my children. They might want the income. I might want to give some of the capital, and I would have given some on the journey to them as well. So I'm looking at what is the most passive, this word passive income and passive investment, there is no such thing generally. Everything takes some form of work, even if it's headspace. But what is the most passive form of property I can do? And I know in my world, I won't be passing on an HMO portfolio or part of an HMO portfolio because Lindsay will be looking after the other half and what she wants to do with it. But I will probably be looking at things like commercial property and the lowest form of work for them, because I think it's the hassle factor that is a big piece of why the kids look at it and go, I don't want that. They are a different generation. Okay, so they want different things. They're much more, about experiences and the like. They probably look at it's a tie to the location where they grew up, and some people just want to spread their wings and go. So if you can start to maybe unlink some of the objections and thoughts they might be having about the portfolio, into, well, the portfolio could be anywhere because it's commercial property, it's fully repairing, insuring leases, it's that sort of thing can help. Because then you are passing on an asset that doesn't take the work, the headspace, the output. Absolutely right. The output, the time, and everything else. But I think part of it comes down to education around you will want another form of income over time, and so I think that financial education piece is really quite important. Now, what we find is often our kids won't take that education from ourselves, right? Because, of course, they know more than we do. I knew more than my dad when I was, 18, 20, 25. Didn't, obviously, but thought I did. So sometimes some external help with that. Yeah. And that could be in some of the networking organisations that we belong to, where there might be, training for the next generation. I know lots of people have spoken about that. It could be with advisors like me. I'm very big about getting the whole family together as soon, and getting children involved in the whole process of planning the sooner the better.
And I think one thing that's interesting is when I mean, we don't have this conversation because my kids, like you, are quite young. But I always think that I wouldn't want them to come straight into the business. I want you to go out and work somewhere else and get some experiences of that to then have the opportunity, if you wanted to come back into the business. But if you didn't want to, the whole idea is I want you to follow your passions. And if income that my business or this business generates helps you to do that, then that can be a good thing. But I don't want anyone to feel tied to that. And if it's kind of slogging away and being unhappy, no, you want to feel passionate about what you do. And if investment is not that thing, then fine, absolutely. But you've got to have some business where the reality is, you might say, oh, it's all right, we've got asset managers managing everything and things like that. You've still got to have someone who's dealing with them. You've still got to have that kind of board level shareholder who's able to appoint the right people. So who's that going to be? And the reality is, it's got to be a family member. And so are you going to keep that business alive for the sake of it? Or what are some of the other options that you can do?
It is because, you can't abdicate. which is exactly what you're saying. You just can't do that, and that probably is why money is lost by the third generation in a lot of cases, because by that stage people are abdicating any form of responsibility, and it's just like nurturing a plant, isn't it? Okay, it's the seeds have been sown, it's grown, it's been watered, it continually gets nurtured, and if you then turn around and go off on holiday for 4 weeks and leave the neighbour with the key, sometimes you come back and maybe the plants aren't in the the way that you left them. So I think there's a whole load of things. There is trying to make sure that your children have some financial intelligence, on how to manage money, how to understand assets and a bit of wealth and income generation and the like, so that they don't just abdicate. They might decide that they want the freedom to go off and follow a passion, but they know how to manage the people who are looking after those assets. That's why I would then turn around and say the assets you probably want to pass on have as little time spent. Resi property is intensive. HMO serviced accommodation is really intensive time management. So
the least operational stuff. So yeah,
absolutely right. So therefore,
where your life strategy Vanguard funds starts to sound a lot more appealing, doesn't it?
It is. So you've either got direct property investment in most instances now, some high yielding format in HMOs or serviced accommodation. Someone has to manage all of that. Because there's so many moving parts, it's more complicated to manage. Therefore, finding a good quality outsourcer is often difficult. Commercial property then probably sits the next one, fully repairing, insuring obligation on the tenant, not the landlord. But and therefore, also if you're doing rent reviews and things like that, you're probably dealing with a RICS qualified surveyor. So again, a different form of person and a more qualified professional individual than someone who generally works in a letting agency. I can say that. I own a letting agency.
The listeners will be complaining, John, the emails we're going to get.
Look, we own one. We've got one. We've got some really great staff. Unfortunately, that isn't the case everywhere. We know before we had our own, we had some shocking experiences, as I'm sure many people have. And then really, I'm very simple in the investment world. Direct resi investment, direct commercial investment. You might get involved in some form of loan type operation. Certainly not the third party loans we see flying in and out, to people who haven't got a candy shrimp and a sherbet dab to between them. And then there is probably the most passive, is an index fund, an equity and bond fund. But of course, as property investors, we're fairly scared of that because we don't really understand them. And I was in exactly that situation until I sort of, became qualified as an IFA. There is a lot to be said in later life for that being the most passive form of investment. It's very different from what we've done in property. So, for the kids, that may well be the way that might be what you pass on, and that's the money that they can draw down from, or it's in that commercial space. There will still be plenty of people out there. No, we'll be different. The HMOs will be in good hands, etc., etc., etc. We're all different.
I can't think of anything worse than, not getting anything is probably the number one thing, but getting a load of HMOs that you've got to operate sort of fresh off the thing would be quite a traumatic experience for anyone, I think. In terms of then kind of structuring things, you talked about gifting. So what are some of the things that people should think about when considering gifting things in their lifetime to kids or loved ones or whoever? That's your dog side, it doesn't matter.
So there's some fundamental decisions to take straight away. If you gift something absolutely to someone, for it to be a gift, you can't benefit from it again. Yeah,
so you can't live in the house while you gift it. And
exactly
all that stuff.
right.
Yep.
So you see all sorts of things going on where people try and gift main homes and continue to benefit from it by living in it. Therefore, that's not really a gift; it's a gift with reservation of benefit. So you have to physically give it away, because I see lots of people, I'll give it away, and then if I need it later, the kids will pay for this and the kids will pay for that. You're on
by that time they're not speaking, so
and then you're in someone else's hands. So you can gift absolutely, but this sort of comes back to, and I'll pop it in now. Everyone's always looking to pay no tax. All right, and to be honest, the only way you're going to pay no tax or very, very limited tax is, you're going to take off to Portugal on the golden visa. You're going to turn around and go to Malta, Cyprus, Dubai, whatever. Leave all your friends and family behind and live an expat lifestyle, which has its, can have its benefits, but often, the reality can often be very different. But I always say that, you really all you can do is choose the tax you're going to pay, who's going to pay it, and when they're going to pay it. All right, so are you going to pay income tax because you're going to keep all the assets it's generating income for you throughout your life? Are you going to sell some assets in lifetime, so you're going to probably hit some capital gains tax, or if they're in a company, some corporation tax? Are you not going to sell any assets till the end, and then you're going to have a bigger issue around inheritance tax? Are you going to pass your assets on in lifetime? Absolutely, to your children. Will you just pass the inheritance tax issue to them for them to deal with? So they're probably going to have to pay some inheritance tax at the end of their life, or some capital gains tax in lifetime, or they're paying lots of income tax, during their life. So these are the decisions that you're making. You're going to pay some tax, accept it, right? Now, it doesn't mean we don't try and minimise tax where we can, right, in legal ways. But, anybody promising you this way is going to mean you're going to pay no or next to nothing tax. It's a scheme. And we all know what's been happening with various different schemes that have been out there over a period of time. Of course, they're not schemes really, are they? Or so the promoters keep telling us. But they are schemes, and you are going to turn around. You have to pay some tax. We can minimise, but it's choosing when and where. And often putting off the evil day till that tax has got to be paid can be quite a good strategy if you can keep kicking the can down the road. Now, sometimes that keeps compounding the tax that someone's eventually going to have to pay, but maybe that's a good strategy, can be a good strategy. So the reason I talk about that whole tax piece is, if you turn around and go and give properties or direct cash to your children, absolutely, you've kicked the inheritance tax can down the road to them. It's in their estate when they die. The only way you can stop that is to gift to trust. Now, you can give unlimited funds away, absolutely, to another person. And as long as you survive 7 years, that is outside of your estate. That's called a potentially exempt transfer. It's potentially exempt because until you survive 7 years, it could still be dragged back into the inheritance tax net. So passing on to the kids, as I say, you just, the Treasury are around forever. Yes. Okay, so they play the inheritance tax long game. They know that if they're not going to get it from you, if you've gifted some money to the children, that's the reason they allow you to sort of pass an unlimited amount absolutely to them. They know they'll capture them.
Do you want to just talk about tapering really very quickly on that point? Because I know there's a few misconceptions about tapering relief, because everyone goes, if you live 7 years and it tapers down, but there's nil rate bands to consider as well, which I think people quite often forget.
There are. So when you gift absolutely to someone, you still have a nil rate band on that gift. What you're doing, up to 7 years, that gift is taking up some or all of your nil rate band. Your nil rate band, currently frozen since 2009, continuing to be frozen into the late 2020s at £325,000. That is your nil rate band, the amount you can give away upon death or in lifetime, tax-free to someone without paying any inheritance tax. So if you gift 50, 100, 200,000 pounds, something under the nil rate band, and you die within 7 years, people talk about, well, that's okay, I'll get some taper relief on that. You won't. The gift has to have used up all your nil rate band for then a portion of the gift over the nil rate band to turn around and get the taper relief.
And then, of course, your nil rate band is used up to that point, so it doesn't then come off any other assets that are in that person's estate, which I think is the trap people often fall into.
Exactly right. Then in their head, they're thinking they've got £325,000 each, 650 between a couple. Obviously, there's the residential nil rate band, which is lovely and complicated. So people, again, don't understand, well, I've used it up in lifetime, I don't have it to use upon death. So as I say, the Treasury are playing that long game. So if you turn around and you give 200,000, you've used 200 of your 325 nil rate band. If you survive 7 years, it's all out of the estate and your nil rate band renews and regenerates itself.
And then one I guess solution or potential solution to that, if you are thinking about gifting anything and hoping that you survive 7 years, is getting an insurance product against that period just for the 7 years. So that follows any taper or relief if the worst was to happen.
Yeah, there is a policy called Gifted to Vivos, and the idea is you can take out a policy for 7 years, and it's like a decreasing term policy, like
Bit like
on your
a mortgage,
mortgage.
yeah.
Exactly right. So there's fewer providers for that now, but yeah, you can absolutely insure the gift, and it starts to turn around and taper down over the period of time. So like I say, the Treasury are constantly playing a long game. Yeah, they know that they're going to see the tax somewhere. The way for you to turn around and separate ownership of those assets and use of those assets is to use trusts. Plainly, therefore, the Treasury put more rules in of what you can gift to trust over these 7-year periods. So a trust has a nil rate band because it's, you give £325,000 to trust, it's used up all your nil rate band. Any more than that you give away in that 7-year period, it's called it's a chargeable lifetime transfer. You'll pay 20% tax in lifetime on that gift. Now, again, for some people, that might be quite a good deal. You've got a 50% discount against the inheritance tax of 40%. So for some people, you might go, yeah, inheritance tax is on sale.
So an example could be you got £1 million and you want to gift it, okay, into trust. The first 325 is your nil rate bang on. So then you've got your
675.
yeah, maths is a bit dodgy there, 675. And that then would be taxed at 20% because you're gifting in your lifetime.
Absolutely right. So again, I stress to everybody listening to the podcast, get out of the mindset of I don't want to pay any tax. Because if you don't want to pay any tax, it will start driving decisions that, well, I want none, not some, not half. I just want none.
Yes.
And it's unrealistic, right? So therefore, if I said to you, do you want to pay 40% tax or 20% tax, you'd bite my hand off at the 20%.
Yeah.
But people then go, well, no, but I want to pay none when it comes to things like inheritance tax. So then people do not gift more during their lifetime into trust and pay the 20% chargeable lifetime transfer.
So if then, in that example of £1 million, you didn't gift it in lifetime, but you waited till death, and at the point of death it goes into trust, what would be the tax implications there of that extra 675?
Yeah, well, so then it's 40%. It's 40%.
40% gets paid, and then the remainder goes into trust. So it's a massive, massive difference, isn't it?
Absolutely right. And then now, of course, it starts to get complex upon death because it depends whether you are the first to die of a couple and you're married or a civil partner.
Yeah. What does
so
the will
you've got
say?
to use a spousal exemption and things like that, and you can use trusts within wills so that you can then attach the surviving spouse and start getting spousal exemption. But ultimately, if you think of it in general terms, if you don't gift that £1 million in lifetime, and if you want to turn around and not pass the inheritance tax issue onto your children and you want to use trusts, maybe paying 20% chargeable lifetime transfer tax is a good thing rather than paying 40% upon death. Because a lot of the conversations I start having with people about trusts is they say, I need some trusts, for when I die because that will save me inheritance tax. It's too late. Right? You have to deal with an inheritance tax issue in your lifetime. On death, it is too late. There is no single silver bullet solution. There generally is no set and forget other than give it all away, survive 7 years, and then you've got nothing to live on. So there's only 4 ways for you to turn around and mitigate your inheritance tax issue. Spend it, gift it, insure against it, or invest in assets that don't attract it. Now, the assets that don't attract it, hence Dyson and Clarkson, that's why everything was going into ponds and agriculture, and obviously things change, and the same thing has been happening with assets that attract business.
DPR and yeah.
So obviously the Treasury have now decided, okay, what you can invest in that doesn't attract it now is starting to be more limited. But again, 20%, you've got the up to £1 million is inheritance tax free, and then it's 20% over the £1 million. So again, the farmers, anyone using business relief is paying half the standard 40% inheritance tax rate. So go on.
And I was going to say, one of the, I think, really important things to remember is that if people are holding these property portfolios that they're expecting then to put into trust at the point of death, well, that property portfolio may have to be liquidated to pay that tax to then go into trust. So if that's what's going to happen, maybe the liquidation should happen a little bit earlier, and you can be a bit more flexible with the well, maybe it could be a more liquid assets that you put it into and things like that.
Absolutely spot on. So again, I see a lot this property portfolio is my legacy. And there's so many things that you can sort of pick at with this, right? Because for it to be a legacy, the more, it's probably highly leveraged, or it has leverage, whether highly or not, it has leverage, okay? And that's the advantage and one of the big things of us turning around and using property as an asset, because we're getting the amplification of return on the leverage. So
drugs, alcohol, and leverage, doesn't it? just amplifies everything.
Absolutely right. So, so from that perspective, no one then ever really thinks about trying to make it easy to pass on the property portfolio and mortgages, because your children therefore then need to be mortgageable. Yeah, and then there's a whole probate is tough enough when you're dealing with grief as a family and individuals. Probate is the most antiquated, backward, frustrating, angry-making process that you've ever been involved in. So there's that. Oh, and by the way, we now need to turn around and sort out 25 mortgages on mum and dad's property portfolio, and and little Johnny's missed 4 payments on his credit card.
Well, not just that though. There's also, you pay, interest starts accruing from, I think it's 6 months after death, and the rate is not small. It's about 5% over base, I think.
It is. It's on the
about 9-ish% is what you're paying, and that starts in 6 months. So when you think about what a pain in the backside it is when you're trying to sell properties, suddenly you go, well, we haven't got probate yet because that's hit 6 months, so we can't actually sell anything.
Exactly right.
And so interest is now accruing, and then we go, right, okay, now we've got the ability to sell. We're going to stick it on the market. Takes, I don't know, 3 to 6 months if you're lucky to sell it.
With interest accruing
and you haven't been able, when you sell a property, usually you have a plan of action, you try and get it to its best value and things like that, and then you sell it. It's a forced sale, and there's normally a proportional price reduction for a forced sale. So again, it's all these things that people are thinking that they're doing for the next generation. And look, there might be people listening going, well, sod then, they can do what they want, I had to, and things like that. Absolutely fine again. But if your goal is to do this, and is to leave something, and is to be tax beneficial, and is to kind of do it in the most efficient way, then all these things are big hurdles that they're going to come up against, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I'm sure we'll come back to liquidity in a while, because it's something I'm very passionate about, in making sure that people are liquid through their lifetime, definitely towards the end. And again, just drawing on my experience as an advisor and planner, people are very quick to turn around and say things like, when I'm in my 80s or 90s and I go into the care home, I won't care what care home I'm in. Well, I've got clients in their 80s and their 90s, and believe me, they do care where they're going to end up. Or they go, oh, well, the kids will just get what they get, yeah? And that's fine saying that in your 40s and your 50s and sometimes even in your 60s. And like I say, then the grandchildren have turned up. And then your children, and then, when you suddenly hit those 80s and 90s, your outlook often changes, and it's like, no, I don't want the government to get any of this, or actually I do want to pass on that legacy. So forward planning, you're trying to plan for your future self, and you don't know what your future self is going to look like, how they're going to think, what their outlook is in life, but you just have to accept the fact that you probably will change. Well, you will change.
Everyone changes over time, don't they? One of the other points in Warren Buffett's letter, which I just thought was so brilliant as always, was where he sort of said, I trust my children implicitly, and because I've got to know them over a long period of time, but I've got no idea what their kids are going to be like, because I'm not going to be around long enough to know that. So I don't trust that they will do the best things. And I just thought, well, yeah, that's totally correct, isn't it? And it goes back to that kind of second generation, third, and what happens to assets over that time. Just on the insurance point then, we talked about the gift into Vivos, which was for when you're gifting and to cover that 7-year period. Life insurance is a really powerful tool, and actually it's quite cheap when you're young, fit and healthy, but people, again, it's when do they start planning these things? And we've talked about gifts, and before we started recording, you were actually telling me something that one of your clients has done. Do you want to kind of go into a bit of detail on that?
Yeah, of course. So when you're gifting money to your children, or when you're thinking about gifting, often we're always thinking about gifting a lump of cash. Okay, and sometimes we're looking at that and either feeling we might be feeling absolutely positive and we want to turn around and give the deposit to our children's flat or house purchase, or we might be feeling a little bit, oh, I don't know what they're going to do with this money, and it sometimes can, what should be a really good thing of gifting that money can sometimes cause family conflict, because if you think that money has gone and then been wasted, these are things that we need. So there's a whole emotional side to gifting that, again, we can talk about another day. But rather than just thinking about gifting lumps of money and asset and cash, I talk to my clients about there's things that you don't think about when you're younger that don't really have a value to you when you're younger, that when you look back, when you hit 40 and you suddenly go, God, I wish I'd taken a critical illness policy out 15 years ago when I was really cheap, because now I really need it to protect the family and my young family and my wife or husband. I can't afford it now. So it's become so much more unaffordable, and the premiums really ramp on definitely things like critical illness, or even taking out, as I say, a really sort of chunky life insurance policy. So what I've been speaking to a lot of clients about is, well, how about you turn around and take out £1 million life policy on your son or daughter? How about you turn around and go and take the £500,000 critical illness policy, and you pay the premium? You're never as cheap to insure as you are today, right? Because you're the age that you are today. You're going to get older. At some point a health issue is going to catch you, all right? And just actuarial underwriting states that as you degrade as an individual, that's probably going to happen as you age. The premium goes up. Fact. So if you turn around and start, rather than giving £200,000 to your children, you might turn and go, do you know what? And I know it doesn't have the same romance as giving £100,000 for a property deposit or whatever, but taking out a critical illness policy on them when they're 21 or 18 or 19 and saying, right, I'm going to pay the premiums till you need it, and I reckon you need it at 35.
Yeah.
So you pay £15 worth of premiums when they are, I don't know what the premium will be, but let's say it's 40, 50, 60 pounds. It's probably going to be like 120, 180 pounds or more, but in 15 years' time, it will really ramp as time moves on. So you turning around and paying out of income that policy for them, and then turning around and passing, and almost then they're the life insured, they take over the premium from then onwards. That's a blooming godsend. If my mum and dad had done that for me with a big hopefully I'll never have to use it. It's the one thing you hope is the biggest.
But it's the
money.
protection.
But it's the protection. Yeah. So life cover, critical illness, very definitely. Obviously, because people, do and don't think about JISAs for their children. They do think about, free money from the government, pension tax relief. I know we're going to touch pensions probably a little bit later when we want to talk about the budget. But, pension tax relief is one of the only bits of free money we get from the government. Anybody can pay £3,600 into their pension, and it actually only costs them £2,880 a year, because there's £720 worth of basic tax relief. So, paying into a grandchild's pension from the moment they're born to age 18 and then stopping, you would have paid in £50,000 worth of premiums by that point in time. That, you've paid into £2,880, £720 worth of free money from the government. That's £240 a month. A lot of our property investors out there can afford £240 a month to be paid into their grandchild's pension. And, you see that compound at even just 4%. That's like £1.2 million when they're in their 60s. Now, I grant you, 1.2 million in today's terms is not what it's going to be in that. But what a lovely start for someone in what isn't a lot of money to us. So we could probably I'm all about having impact with what you give. And most people follow this model of stuff gets passed on when they die. Well, statistically, so take you and Sheena, right? So at the age that you're at, we obviously won't talk about that on camera, looking very good these days. But statistically, there's more than a 60% chance that one of you is going to hit your 90s. We don't know which one of you and how far into your 90s that's going to be. The kids are probably therefore going to be in their 60s, right? At their 60s, they've had 2/3 of their life, right? So the impact that the money at the end that you leave is way less. Therefore, you can have more impact in lifetime. And impact can be the gifting of lumps on first houses, trading up, etc. It can be these things like policies. It can be children's and grandchildren's pensions, JISAs, all of these things. Some of these things can come out of income because you will maybe miss less that 2, 3, 4, 500, £1,000 a month out of the income that you're generating, passing through to the children. And this is when, gifts out of normal expenditure and the like start coming in. So you don't know what you don't know. People don't think about these things, right? This is my job as a planner, to turn around and start throwing stuff out there. It's not right for everybody, but these are the conversations we'll have.
And the problem is when you do start thinking about these things, because you will, it's too late.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest kind of regret almost, I think, because no one wants to think about death and passing on. But actually, when you start to, I guess, frame it in a slightly different way, how do I want to be remembered? Oh, he helped me get my deposit on my first house, or actually, oh God, I've got this pension now that I haven't had to do anything for, and what a relief. Or critical illness cover, I would never be able to afford the premiums, but actually they're only 15 quid a month because he got them
absolutely
when I was 18 years. They're fantastic, right? So I think those are just some really, really brilliant things. Or even for the grandkid with a pension, oh God, that's a third generation, and their kids will be looking up and going, God, wasn't my great granddad an absolute bloody legend for doing all that? And that's what legacy is all about.
Legacy, and it is, and so it's memories of those things. And again, we've mentioned this whole memory piece a few times here. So
aren't we egotistical for thinking like that, isn't it? It's just like I think, oh, what a prat. But yeah, it's
but it's true.
Nice. Yeah, I am.
You could turn around if your children and your grandchildren, if you took out of the family budget holidays, and maybe you paid for your children and their kids to go on holiday, maybe maybe without you at times, and then with you at times, you have a big family holiday. Yeah, that's memories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we always talk about wealth building and wealth protection. Well, how about memory creation?
Yeah.
So memory creation is far more important than wealth building, right? I see and hear wealth building all the time. Wealth builder, wealth builder, wealth builder. No, memory creator. That's what is the key piece. So if we can create those memories through spending time, having, if you're still in your retirement running your resi portfolio, which means you don't have the time freedom to go and take your family away.
What's the bloody point?
What's the point, Bill?
Yeah, love that. We might have to name this episode "Memory Creation," mate. I think that's a great catchy titles. Is there anything else? I mean, legacy planning is an absolutely vast subject. So obviously we're going to say that come and speak to someone like yourself if you are considering it, because there are so many avenues to go down. There's so many different products and tools to use, and when you get one, it might impact something else. So there's no, like you said, there's no silver bullet. Everything has a pro and a con, and one thing might be great for something, but it might negatively impact something else. So it's really, really important to have this holistic view. Is there anything else that you think is just, we've got to tell the audience now, that you can think of that we haven't already touched on?
No, I mean, you've just summed it up superbly. It's trade-offs,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Each client I deal with, we're generally not wealthy enough to not have any trade-offs. Yeah, and so, trusts can be a wonderful vehicle, but plainly they often have a knock-on effect on finance and mortgage finance. Now that market has opened up a little bit more, probably in the last year or two. It used to be bloody hard to get mortgage lenders that would lend money with trust involvement.
Do you know what? It's funny. Simon from 978 Finance has just been doing a very, very complicated deal with a series of trusts, getting them financed, and it's bloody hard work. It's hard work, even though there are lenders saying they've been jumping through hoops and it's taken a while. It's getting there, but and hopefully he'll come on the show and describe it. But it's that's certainly something that I don't think a lot of people consider when they think, why am I in property? Oh, it's because of the leverage. Great, I'm going to go into trust. Oh, now the whole reason I was in it is now nullified. So yeah,
and this is why that whole journey through someone's life stages, which we touched on in the last Rodcast, and you know how passionate I am on how people's life stages, identify where you're at, look at what's to come, and start to think about the changes that happen. Coming back to this whole focus on wealth building and financial freedom. At some point, you're probably not wanting to build any more wealth. At some point, you might well decide that you're going to deleverage.
Mm-hmm.
When does that look? At what point is that optimal time? Because there's optimal from a financial perspective, there's an optimal from a tax perspective, there's an optimal from a life perspective and a time perspective. So it's understanding that, because as I say, and Simon will be, I'd love to hear what Simon's been doing on that, because I've seen the market open up somewhat more. It used to, as I say, it was almost impossible to get mortgage finance involvement with trusts. It's a little bit easier now. I use that expression easier, with a...
Yeah, obviously it depends on what you're doing. This one I know is a complex deal in its own right, let alone with the various trusts.
But it's not with TMW, it's not with the it's not with the mate B&M, Birmingham Mids. It's not with your KRVSs. It's probably your short, so that there are lenders, but again they'll all have their own criteria, and if you're fixated on getting the cheapest rate, well then you're not going to get it, because you're going to be with a specialist lender. So I think having a proper plan to understand so asset mix will change through your life. That's one of the biggest things that's coming out of this first individual conversation. And yet I find people they think nothing will change, right? They think they'll keep the property portfolio forever. They'll keep whatever it is. The asset mix has to change.
Yeah,
in most cases through lifetime, because and it might just be you pay down some debt or sell some to pay down the debt on the rest. So you've got an unleveraged portfolio that you pass on that has its own set of time factor issues. But in the end, that's probably easier to pass on with trusts that will potentially then separate ownership of those assets and use those assets, so that you're not passing on the inheritance tax to your children. So that is a big one to start thinking about, because often people either have a very skeptical view of trusts. They're expensive. Well, they're only expensive, and if whoever told you that experienced the fact that a lot of people look at trusts as a fee earning opportunity, right? They want you to keep all the assets in trust. And then there's tax returns and accounts and all the things that go with it. So trusts can be expensive if they're used often in the wrong way, but they can be a magical thing if used in the right way, but again, not right for everybody.
I think one of the big things that people can look at, and it's what you taught me when we went through this process for us, for my family, was looking at what are the priorities. Because so many people think, right, okay, tax efficiency and IHT is the number one thing I want to work out. But then when you think, okay, well, what about your health? What about ensuring financial stability if you're gone at an earlier age? What about, I don't know, actually enjoying life, and what does that look like? And there's so many different things, and what you really need to do is prioritise which things of those are either non-negotiable and you've got to cover them off, and where they come in that pecking order. Because it's all well and good to say, right, I've got to cover IHT or I don't want to pay tax. But if actually you become sick and you're incapacitated, or, I don't know, worse happens, you die a bit earlier than you think you would, and your kids are still vulnerable, like, what happens there? Yeah. So there's so many, and when you start to think of it like that, you go, well, yeah, that's more important. Yeah, well, actually, my health is more important, and this is more important. And suddenly, those things that you thought were the priority, and you thought were the driving force behind you deciding what to do, suddenly drop right down that pecking order. And that's where I think working with someone like yourself can really, really add some value there.
You said it a minute ago that often, it's not until something happens and then it's too late. We're often driven by pain points, aren't we? So I know my business and what we do in financial planning, estate planning, money management. Like the estate planning and a lot of the financial planning, we're the easy thing to put off. I'll deal with that one day. We know it's important, we put it off, or we think we've got it sorted, but we can't see our own blind spots, hence why they're blind spots. But what drives us often to then go and get something sorted is a pain point, and sometimes that pain point can be a catastrophic one, big health issue. Someone dies in the family, and that then drives you through personal experience to suddenly go, I need to sort my will, I need to sort the lasting powers of attorney, I need to do this, I need to do that. Oh crikey, I've never even thought about life insurance. And often the role of a planner, unfortunately, there's still so much of the financial services industry that are just product sellers. Yeah. The role of a planner is to challenge you on your thinking and on your strategy and on your plan, and then think about the things that you might not have thought about to do with those elements of it, and to highlight some of the trade-offs of the path that you're treading. It still might be the best path. But that often is my role and my team's role. That's what we do. We turn around and we'll challenge your thinking. So come back to what you said about life insurance. You know my view on that. We'd all love to be able to turn around and insure against the whole mortgage debt that we have. Most of us can't afford the premium, if we've got a reasonable sized property portfolio. So somewhere between the home mortgage and that is the right amount of life cover to have. And I bang on all the time to people and saying, well, don't just worry about mortgages. It's, do you want the surviving spouse or partner to have to keep the property portfolio when you're gone just because they can't afford not to keep it? So often things like, and it is a financial product often sold in the wrong way, but sometimes life insurance can be a great thing to give that person freedom post someone's passing, because you've either got, sometimes in a couple, you've got one person is totally focused on the business and the property business and the other partner isn't, maybe dealing with family or working full time, whatever it is. When that, if you lose one or t'other, if you lose the person who wasn't really interested in the property portfolio, it often still means that you, as the survivor who was, your priorities often change. I've lost 4 clients this year. I can tell you now, people's priorities change post the death of a loved one.
And it's interesting you said about, like, you only understand where you want to make changes when something has happened to you or you've seen it happen to someone else. But it's all the things that you haven't seen that could happen to you that are the ones you want to kind of cover yourself on. And that's an impossible task to do if you don't know about them. And that's where obviously speaking to someone like yourself can be really great.
Yeah.